Look at a map of South America. You see a continent defined by the Andes, divided by Spanish and Portuguese. But then there is Brazil. This massive nation occupies nearly half the landmass, speaks a different language, and possesses an identity so distinct, so contradictory, that it often feels like an entire world unto itself. Why, in a continent of shared colonial heritage and geography, is Brazil the only country like this? The answer lies in a series of historical accidents, geographic anomalies, and cultural fusions that created a nation perpetually defined by its extremes: extreme poverty and extreme wealth, devastating exploitation and unparalleled joy, ecological fragility and unmatched biodiversity. This isn't just a country, it's an experiment in continental scale, and its story is unlike any other on Earth. If you've ever been fascinated by the sheer scale and complexity of Brazil, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most unique cultures. To understand Brazil, we must first accept that it defies easy categorization. It is not just the largest Catholic nation, nor simply the home of the Amazon. It is the only Lusophone giant in a Hispanophone sea, the only former monarchy in South America to achieve independence peacefully, and perhaps the world's most successful melting pot, a place where African, indigenous, and European histories collide daily to form something entirely new. We are going to explore the 5 critical factors that forged this nation into the singular entity it is today. The very first factor setting Brazil apart is its geographic isolation and scale. Brazil is immense, a true continental state stretching from the tropics to near temperate zones. This vastness, covering nearly 8.5 million square kilometers, means its identity is not monolithic. The Deep South, influenced by European immigration, feels distinct from the sun-drenched African-rooted Northeast, which in turn is worlds away from the frontier spirit of the Amazonian North. Crucially, the Amazon River Basin, the largest rainforest in the world, occupies a significant portion of its territory. This geographic feature has historically isolated the Brazilian interior, focusing early colonization efforts almost entirely along the coastline. Unlike its Spanish-speaking neighbors, whose major settlements were often established in the high Andes or on the Pacific coast, Brazil's historical center of gravity remained Atlantic-facing. This vast, often impenetrable interior meant that Portuguese control was often tenuous, leading to a long history of internal expansion, known as bandeirantes, who pushed the nation's borders far beyond the original Tordesillas line, consuming territory that geographically should have belonged to Spain. The sheer scale allowed Brazil to swallow up neighboring territories and maintain its unity, where smaller, geographically constrained Spanish viceroyalties fractured into multiple separate nations. This brings us to the second, most defining factor, the Portuguese exception. While the vast majority of Latin America was colonized by Spain, Brazil was claimed by Portugal. This difference fundamentally altered its trajectory. Spain's colonial strategy involved establishing numerous viceroyalties and captainities, each governed separately, leading to the fragmentation we see today: Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Argentina, etc. Portugal, however, treated Brazil as a single, unified colony, the State of Brazil. This singular administrative structure, centered first in Salvador and later in Rio de Janeiro, laid the foundation for a singular national identity and language. When the Portuguese royal family, fleeing Napoleon's invasion, relocated their entire court to Rio de Janeiro in 1808, the status of the colony changed dramatically. Rio became the temporary capital of the Portuguese Empire. This monumental event elevated Brazil from a mere colony to a co-kingdom, preparing it for an independence that would be unlike any other in the Americas. The third critical distinction is the monarchical path to independence. When King João VI returned to Portugal in 1821, he left his son, Dom Pedro, as regent. Tensions quickly rose as the Portuguese parliament attempted to reduce Brazil back to colonial status. In 1822, Dom Pedro declared independence with the famous cry, "Independencia ou morte," independence or death. This was not a bloody revolutionary war led by generals like Bolívar or San Martín. It was an independence declared by the heir to the throne, establishing the Empire of Brazil. For 67 years, Brazil remained a constitutional monarchy, a period of relative stability that allowed the newly independent nation to consolidate its territory without the widespread civil wars and border disputes that plagued the fragmented Spanish-American republics.
This long period under the unifying banner of the Braganza monarchy preserved the territorial integrity of Brazil, ensuring that the former colony did not splinter into a dozen smaller states along regional lines. It provided a powerful, centralized authority that held the disparate regions together, reinforcing that singular Portuguese identity against the backdrop of Spanish-speaking Republican neighbors. The fourth, and perhaps most captivating factor, is the phenomenon of total cultural synthesis and miscegenation. Brazil was built on the interaction of three primary groups: the Portuguese colonizers, the millions of enslaved Africans brought primarily from Angola and West Africa, and the diverse indigenous populations. Brazil imported more enslaved Africans than any other country in the Americas, nearly 5 million people, 10 times more than the United States. This enormous demographic shift meant that African culture, religion, and cuisine were not merely influences, they became foundational elements of Brasilidade. Unlike other colonial powers that enforced strict segregation, the Portuguese approach, driven by demographic necessity and cultural permissiveness, resulted in widespread miscegenation. The resulting culture is a deep, inseparable blend. The Portuguese language is spoken with African rhythms. The national dish, feijoada, is an adaptation of African slave cuisine. And the spiritual landscape is defined by syncretism, where African religions like Candomblé and Umbanda blend seamlessly with Catholicism. This intense cultural fusion produced a national identity that celebrates hybridity, famously described by sociologist Gilberto Freire as a racial democracy, though modern scholars rightly critique this term for obscuring profound racial inequality. Nevertheless, the cultural product is undeniably unique, a place where samba thrives, capoeira blends dance and martial arts, and the very concept of racial purity is historically and geographically irrelevant to the national narrative. Finally, we arrive at the paradox of the eternal giant. Brazil is a nation perpetually on the cusp of greatness, yet constantly grappling with structural failure. It possesses staggering natural resources, iron ore, oil, and the agricultural capacity to feed a large portion of the world, making it a global economic player. Yet it harbors some of the world's most extreme social inequality. This inequality is visible in every major city. The gleaming glass towers of São Paulo stand feet away from vast favelas, settlements born out of neglect and migration. This inequality stems directly from its historical reliance on slave labor and its long-standing oligarchical political structures, which ensured that the vast wealth generated by sugar, gold, and coffee remained concentrated in the hands of a few landowning families. The abolition of slavery in 1888, the last in the Western world, occurred without any land reform or integration policies for the freed population, condemning millions to perpetual poverty and laying the groundwork for the modern socioeconomic divide. The political system, too, is uniquely Brazilian, a sprawling, decentralized federal republic often paralyzed by corruption and regional interests, yet capable of generating bursts of global soft power, whether through football, music, or pioneering environmental science. The sum of these factors, continental scale, Portuguese singularity, peaceful monarchical history, radical cultural fusion, and deep-seated economic paradox, creates the complex entity we call Brazil. The feeling that Brazil is the only country like this comes down to its unique ability to hold contradictions in tension. It is a place of profound melancholy longing, known as saudade, coupled with an explosive, optimistic joy, encapsulated by carnival. It is the nation that gave the world the futuristic utopian architecture of Brasilia, yet struggles daily with providing basic infrastructure to its poorest citizens. Brazil's distinctiveness lies in its refusal to conform to the historical neatness of its neighbors. It never fractured, it never fully committed to the Republican ideal early on, and it never ceased mixing its people and traditions. This continuous, chaotic process of synthesis is Brasilidade.
It serves as a reminder that national identity is rarely clean or simple. It is usually a messy, joyous, and heartbreaking struggle played out on a continental stage, making Brazil not just unique, but essential to understanding the modern world. What aspect of Brazil do you find most unique? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our other videos on the hidden histories of South America.